Hello, here we are. Welcome everybody. Dr. Paul with the eminent Jeremy Fox um,
Hello.
from Next Level Psychology. And we are here to continue our series. Wow, Geraldine immediately shows up. That's amazing. Hey,
Hello, everyone.
Geraldine and Justin. Um, we are here to continue our series on ego defenses. I say as superpowers, but that would only apply to the mature ego defenses. So we're always pairing the more primitive or immature ego defenses with maybe their counterpoint or their analogous, more mature version, which is what all of us would want to grow into. And this time, Jeremy has already written a beautiful article about the ego defense, the immature ego defense of identification. But there are several distinctions and exceptions to it being a kind of a negative thing or an immature thing. So I'll just lead with that. And Jeremy, here we go with another primitive or immature ego defense, and then its antidote as a
Yes.
superpower. We were thinking fortitude or assertiveness and fortitude.
Yes. I like that. I really thought idealization was a good one. It's an immature defense. So when you view someone as all good and idealize them, that can work for a time. It starts out as a child. You do that with parents, either one or both. And so a a tendency to see only the person as unflawed, perfect, pristine. That's what determines it as idealization versus something more positive. And this really hooks into traumatology. Kids will find a reason to blame themselves if their parent is abusive, right? Because they have to keep that idealized, safe parent figure in order to believe that they, as a child, are safe. The child can't afford to think my parent's really bad and I'm in danger. And so, like so many defenses, what starts out as evolutionarily advantageous to keep your parent happy and maintain safety and stability, it can then continue on in your other relationships. So, and we're going to get into some good versions of it, but for one thing, social media idealization of influencers and seeing only their positive because that's all that's on screen and thinking, that someone is your guiding light when they're just a human being. And when they fall or when they do something that upsets you, it kind of crushes your what we would call a parasocial attachment to this individual and leaves you bereft and without a guiding virtue or figure. And so what once started as a way to bond with parents can turn into all or nothing binary thinking of this person is either amazing and my hero or they are completely irredeemable and I'm heartbroken and I can't trust people and that sort of thought process. I'll wrap up and
Wow.
say I gave some examples in my essay, including Che Guevara, which it's always interesting when someone um, has only a short life and they can become fossilized as a sort of figure of aspiration, right? That you can idealize because they can't disappoint you in real time. And so I
Mhm.
think that's my introduction to idealization.
Kurt Cobain.
What?
Kurt Cobain, musicians, the 27 age, the age of
Uh,
27. Kurt Cobain, I don't know if
Winehouse.
Michael Hutchence was, Amy Winehouse, um, Chris Cornell. I mean, although he was older,
Yeah.
but all the musicians who die at 27, right? And they're Orpheus. They're literally Orpheus. It's exactly the Orpheus myth. What happens to them? Orpheus is
Right.
killed in the prime of his life after daring to go into the underworld, and but the head is preserved, meaning the voice. The voice is preserved for all
Yes.
eternity for humans to enjoy and gods. Um, wow, that was a lot.
I
What
know.
you just said. Well, you made me think of several things. For one, the idea that idealization definitely occurs toward parent figures without getting explicitly religious or specifying a particular religion. If I looked as a former secular scientist at religion and just translated into psychology, I would say idealization, even of an imperfect or even, God forbid, um, hostile parent or harmful parent, idealizing them would help the person preserve a kind of substrata for faith. And I don't mean like faith necessarily specifically in God or a God, but in the safety of the world, that it is governed by something safe, that I can be safe going out into the world, operating in the world, that I will somehow be, now that's the paternal aspect. I will also be protected and nurtured in a maternal way going out into the world or being in the world. I'll be nurtured, I'll be given nutrition. That's what I mean by generalized faith as a psychological trait. I almost think idealization is absolutely necessary to form the substrata, the foundation to be able to have faith in anything, including yourself. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. I mean, you start out with concrete thinking, right? If you want to look at Piaget's developmental levels that we learn in intro psychology, Jean Piaget, who studied childhood development. I mean, you don't really get abstract in your thinking until around 12, 13, where you can be more nuanced. And so, what is idealization? Well, it's concrete version of respect or identification or admiration. Okay, checks out. I think in faith, you have to be careful. We're called to idealize Christ as Christians, but also, what does that look like? Do you then transfer the expectation that life is always going to be easy and perfect? Because you have to be clear, you're idealizing his character and his salvation of you, and you want to emulate that. And so, to me, idealization can also come with this whole grab bag of expectations of, well, this person's my version of perfect. So that means I'm always going to be comfortable or I'm always going to get blank. And that's where the mismatch happens. And I think
Aha.
there's a
Okay.
lot of church hurt in people who idealize an abusive parent and then come out of it and think, well, is that the church? Is that my father was a Christian and he used religion to abuse me? That means, I can't trust the church or God. And that's always heartbreaking because then that gets transferred to faith when someone's so contaminated another's view of faith. So you bring up an excellent point. If you're early and we God image psychology looks at what was your early metaphor or experience of a father and of God? What are we bringing into that in faith? What are we bringing from early childhood imprinting?
Yeah. Well, I think you, me, and Dr. Natalie Martinek were all together on a recent live stream in which she might have, I think she brought up the model of one's higher power, let's call it, or God,
Right.
is based on the parenting, right? And there's both ideally masculine and feminine parenting. There's both a paternal and a maternal force that we
Yes.
all need throughout our lives. And so if you don't pass through this immature but age appropriate for a certain age, ego defense of idealizing your caregivers, then you are, as an adult, maybe godless or faithless, which means faith in the universe, faith in the world, faith in the safety of your environment, faith in your own abilities. And then you get into self-defeating behaviors and things like this. So I thought it was good to maybe lead with the positive attributes of
Yeah.
idealization because it literally is an immature ego defense. It's for those in toddlerhood through latency, perhaps, before getting to adolescence, and then maybe a little bit into adolescence. So there's, of course, the dark side to it, and we'll get with that. But I can think of two other. Well, one's a version of what we just covered, but two other positive uses of idealization in the adult life. Huge, incredibly important, maybe one of the most important uses of it or features of adult life is limerence, the ability to fall in love in the sexual attraction phase of courtship, which is full of projection. I have a diagram about this. It would be hard to show right now, but two people's boundary configurations in early courtship in sexual attraction would be distant from each other. The boundaries don't abut, the boundaries don't yet intersect. That would be partnership. The boundaries are a little distant, and that distance affords, like a pinhole camera, affords the ability to project one's ideal maternal figure or paternal figure onto the other. And it's an ideal. And so you literally see your new love interest. You're falling in love with essentially a deity, which is basically modeled after your ideal opposite sex parent that you once uh, attached to, right? If you get into
Right.
attachment theory. So the connection to attachment theory, it's crucial to be able to idealize, yes, in youth with your opposite sex parent, but in adulthood with a prospective mate, so that you can so bond with them and be so compelled by them that you forego the the crisis of what's it called, plurality in the dating apps, the paradox of choice in dating apps. That it seems like you literally could date a billion potential people in the dating apps, which is not true. It's not physically possible, nor are you really going to be served up appropriate mates. But it seems like maybe you could have the entire world at your disposal for dating without the ability to have limerence or to fall in love with a specific person that is so reminiscent of your original attachment to the opposite sex parent through your idealization of that opposite sex parent as an object of desire and love and comfort and protection and goodness. Without that, you could never overcome the paradox of choice in dating apps, meaning the plurality of people available to you, seemingly available to you. In other words, it only takes one to find the perfect mate for life, to find what they used to call a soulmate, which I believe is possible. We have numerous potential soulmates, but I believe in the concept of a soulmate because I know scientifically limerence is real and the idealization in the adult life of a prospective mate that you're falling for is real. You
Yes.
forsake all others.
Right. So you're saying the ability to idealize is necessary to cut through that paradox of choice.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting. We idealize many things that we never have before in our culture. Um, other people who are like pseudo celebrities, um, and movie. We have our new culture of like literal superhero worship, and keeping up with latest movies, and people being absolutely heartbroken if the movie doesn't shake out the way they want. But then we idealize less than before as well, I think, with dating. And maybe a big part of that is causal with the paradox of choice. It's hard to idealize a picture on a screen and of a written profile. And so the idea of going on a date with every one of those people can be overwhelming. Um, and so you have to kind of take an educated guess on who could I think another word I like to use is admire. Like admiration has some idealization there, right? A healthy little dose, a sprinkling of that. And so I think there's different narratives on what dating is for. And I think as a correction to the idea that you idealize someone and make them your world, which is sort of an enmeshment long term, that there's been a narrative in the Western world of, well, it's not that serious with dating and just see who you like in the moment. It's like, well, so that doesn't quite get it right either. unless you click and there's chemistry and the idealization flows. So I think you hit a very crucial point that you do have to be open to that three-dimensional human experience of admiration that suspends the negative. And you can't do that without some projection of what you admire onto the other and bridging the gap between your past and present. And it's very difficult to do that. It would almost be like a fan fiction of a book to do that with someone only on a profile and make a snap judgment of it, because it's like you're looking at a character in a book and you have to project what you want of them. But it's not as long as a book or even a pamphlet, it's a profile.
Right, right. I mean, slight bunny trail going deep into human courtship, but you just inspired me right there to think about the the process of human courtship as I have devised it. I must admit, humbly said, in 9 steps and 3 phases that parallel the triune brain model of the evolutionary psychologists. Made it simple by having 3 steps in 3 phases, so 9 total steps. My step 2, I call ladies and gentlemen. And ladies and gentlemen is the middle step of sexual attraction before you have come to really vetting and testing the other person to see if you're going to move on to boyfriend girlfriend status and exclusive dating. And after the initial complete limerence based step, which is wow, beautiful, hot, interesting, charming man, the most interesting man in the world, the most beautiful woman in the world, the Aphrodite instinct in females to display health and vitality via symmetry of the face and body, which is also called beauty. And it's not superficial beauty, it's symmetry of the face and body, which, according to the evolutionary psychologists, um, signifies reproductive, robust health, which is really what our genes, drive us toward in, at least in mating. So if that's the initial, you could even say almost superficiality of dating, like the Instagram dating kind of thing, like how hot is the person, how vibrant and charismatic is the person. That's just step one. That's the initial advertising of ourselves within dating. Once you get to step 2, I call it ladies and gentlemen, that's where the nuances of the paternal, kind, fatherly, tender display by the male toward the female attracts her interest or doesn't attract her interest in a way that is an overlay on the schema of her actual ideal father or the best traits of her own actual biological father. If
Mm.
there's somewhat of a match, then limerence it peaks and then it progresses even further into sexual attraction and toward exclusivity for the female. If the female displays not just beauty, but some sorts of personality traits and language and appearance and vibe and spirit that somewhat resembles what he idealizes about his own biological mother, despite her foibles and failures or even temporarily abusive behaviors, he finds what everything that is good about his mother. This is how the Oedipus is transcended. I've always wondered, if men and women are doomed to marry their opposite sex parent, what if that parent was a terrible person? I've always wondered, are we doomed to marry our mother or our father? And no, the way to transcend the Oedipus is that we automatically, instinctually, biologically notice the best features, however few they were, in our opposite sex parent, and we see them in potential peer mates, then that
Right.
person is extra special. And we call that our type. That person is
Ah.
my type, regardless of hair color, eye color, height, weight, whatever. Our type is that which is most similar to the, back to idealization, the idealized aspects of our very flawed opposite sex parent. And that's what attracts us in step two of sexual attraction and of overall human courtship. That was a
I
lot.
Yeah, no, what do you think about people who rebel and, like, they have an authoritarian father or whatever, go for somebody who's more of a hippie, so to speak? Like, they had a Papa Don't Preach thing back in the day with Madonna.
Uh, gut reaction is whatever he was is going to be the schema for what the girl will look for in her adult life. Whatever is ideal about that, whether he was a hippie, a yuppie, a boomer, whatever he was, an accountant, an athlete, a hunter, whoever he was, him being his authentic self and loving her in a tender way that is protective in all the newly rediscovered masculine instincts like stoicism, being a provider, protector, and
Yeah.
being a winner, being the victor in conflicts, being the victor in business, being the victor in his career hierarchy. All of those things are the things that the girl is protected by, her anxieties assuaged by, and all is good in the world because of. In fact, I once told you that for over 10 years, I ran weekly groups of males and weekly groups of females to
Right.
discuss their unique issues. And I would sometimes have them in person. And every single time I would have a group of men in person or a group of women in person. And I would ask one question unique to each sex. In the back of the room, there would be weeping, muffled weeping. For males, it was, have you ever in your life, other than from your own mother, been told by a female, I really believe in you?
Mm.
I believe, meaning I believe in what your life is all about. I believe in your mission for your life, which men call it often. I believe in what you're all about. I believe in you, which also means I prefer you. I prefer
Yes.
you to all other little boys in the world. But in the adult world, it's mate selection and preference. That's step two of human courtship, which I call ladies and gentlemen. Being a
Right.
lady in the old fashioned way, it gets cultural and sociological sounding, but it's biological. Throughout all human history, it has been this way and always will be. If you want success at love, the female says, I admire you so much in some sort of way. I believe in you. I believe in what you're about. And guess what that harkens back to? The attachment to her, the idealized portions of her father. That's how she sees his value and how she can say, I believe in you in adult life. Now, that was what made the men cry in the back of the room. Why?
Right.
Because almost no men that I've seen in 20 to 30 years, almost none, have
Yeah.
told me in these settings, I have been told by a female that she believes in me. That's tragic. For the females, the analogous idealized spirit of the father in her life, even if he was a bad father, a faulty father, there was some little nugget of goodness about him. What it caused her to feel as a girl, boiled down, was don't you worry, I will take care of things. Everything will be all right. Don't worry. It's almost like Bob Marley. Don't worry, I will take care of things. You don't have to. You don't have to do the actions, my little girl. I will take care of things and everything will be all right. That's how I boil down the whole spirit of the father idealized by the girl, which she then needs to find in the adult male. And so that's her feeling. I know that because of this man, this peer, that I will be all right. Everything will be all right. And he will take care of things. That makes me, I believe in him. See, they're parallel, they're synchronous. And it's what our culture has temporarily broken today. That's synchrony. Step two of human courtship. It's why there are less babies, there's less marriage, there's more divorce. Maybe not more divorce, but there's more discord. It's why populations are declining instead of growing. It's the failure of step two of human courtship, which comes back to idealization, failure to idealize, maybe failure to originally idealize something about the opposite sex parent, but most certainly in the dating life as an adult, the failure to see that which is ideal in a prospective mate.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we're in a culture of cynicism and anxiety. I mean, it's tough if you're primed to expect something negative. It's easy to see yellow flags as red, right? When they really mean pause and judge character further. Um, we've kind of taken the romantic aspect out of a lot of life, the poeticism, and we're left with a lot of therapy jargon and a lot of attachment and trauma talk. Which, as a trauma focused therapist, I think there's most certainly a time to talk about and to work through to reprocess and desensitize trauma. Don't get me wrong. I think letting the trauma lead, though, it's because I work with trauma. I know expectation is quite a lot. And so if we're so focused on transference from the past or idealizing in a very infantile sense, then it's going to be easy for the spell of romance to be broken. And we you make me think of Roosevelt's model of investment of relationships and the ridiculing alternatives element of
Yeah.
mechanism of partner maintenance, and the idea that now we have the decision fatigue and now we have a lot of thoughts and options that aren't really romantic, aren't really the person in the
Derogation of competition. You can't have Roosevelt's derogation of competition if you think you have a billion beautiful people to choose from as potential mates. And then you can say Peter Pan or adolescent Cinderella forever and never grow up and never actually find a mate and dare to recognize what is ideal in them and fall in love. You never
Yeah.
fall in love. You're in a loveless world when you literally, it's so ironic. In a world of a billion potential lovers, you're in a loveless world because of this.
Well, in a world of like 300 different toothpaste brands at the grocery store and you're standing and looking at them, I mean, you're not going to make a decision quickly unless you have an in with one of them, unless one of them, has really good branding or is one your mom used and she has really white teeth or something. If you want to get into the decision fatigue and choice fatigue,
And you have a coupon. You have a coupon for one of the toothpastes,
yeah, yeah,
which makes you a narcissist potentially because you're just looking for the best deal. You're not playing the game of love. You're looking for the discount
yeah. And I
bargain.
think I, that's really funny. I mean, it really with romance, there's got to be some levity and some play, and the mix of play and serious conversation about values and goals is so precarious. I mean, it doesn't have to be. When you get in the hang of it and when you practice it, it gets better. But people have in their I mean, there's been a lot of talk about the failure of romantic love. And I would hone that and say, well, which narrative are you talking about? Because It's certainly not the, like, Byronic poem, sort of epic love tale anymore. You've got that still in some romantic movies, sure, but you have different agendas from person to person. You have some people wanting monogamy and some not. And I'm not at all taking that as a swing against people who are non-monogamous. I'm saying same with decision fatigue. Decisions, I'm not making fun of each individual choice. It's just a lot of choices at the end of the day, whether you think they're good or
Yeah.
bad or whatever. So, and whether you're susceptible to being stuck in analysis paralysis and thinking, well, that didn't work out for my friend. She has a bad dating history. Guys are bad. Or the same thing with men, who fear women or dislike women because they've seen video after video or example after example of women that they don't think have good character. It's like, well, what are you watching and what are you exposed to? What would you qualify the people as good behavior? Where do you go to be around people of better behavior? That's a huge question.
Hmm.
But I think the
So,
idealization, yeah, go ahead.
well, the dark side of idealization, before we maybe look at mature alternative analogies to idealization, making things real instead of the perfection in the imagination, is what's wrong. One of the things wrong with idealization that makes it immature is the perfectionism that is stifling of action. So you literally are living in we talked earlier about, maybe Minecraft or living in a
Yes.
fantasy video game. That's not real. It feels like artificial accomplishment. If you get points and you get more lives or tools or whatever you get in various video games, but it's not real. In the end, it really is not real. It's not you building a career. It's not you building a love. It's not you building a family. It's not you finding meaning in life. It has no meaning. It's practice for something. It's a distraction. It's entertaining, but it's not real. So that's the really dark side of idealization. If you stay stuck in it, then you end up a male Peter Pan, a female helpless Cinderella, maybe a Snow White, where there's no one to wake you up and you're in the glass coffin forever. You never do grow into the full feminine life. You're stuck, right?
Yes.
Trauma can do that. Lack of development can do that. Unenriching environments, culturally, financially, socially, familially, can do that. But that's the dark side of just endlessly hero worshiping. And one last worse thing, if you idealize to the extreme, to the max, if you make that almost your singular ego defense that you use to navigate the world, get along in it, you're a fanboy of all these people.
Yes.
You never develop something yourself. You never dare to go out there into the world and have a voice and start to grow and hone your voice. You're just a follower forever. Then you never find meaning and you never find real love. You find some kind of fake thing, or you find a narcissist who sees something to poach from you, and then you get married to them. But you never come into your own in what your life was meant to be, either as a man or as a woman. You stay backward. You stay encased in glass like Snow White. You stay uh, quiescent in carbonite like Han Solo, locked in
I like
his
that.
black coffin. You never come back to life if you idealize everyone. And yet we all need to do it actually throughout life in order to find little momentary inspiration, almost like remembering Obi-Wan Kenobi, seeing Obi-Wan Kenobi for 1 minute before you have to go into a fight as Luke Skywalker. That's a good use of it. The idealization of the father or the mother coming back to inspire you, or the hero,
Yes.
or you admire Michael Jordan or Tom Brady or Brad Pitt or Angelina Jolie or some actress, or Sydney Sweeney or whoever you think is hot, bright, interesting, talented, and you will never meet these people unless you live in New York or maybe LA, but probably not there. You'll never meet these people, and yet they actually serve as kind of paternal or maternal inspirational forces in your life. So that's both good and bad. It's good when used briefly, like talking to Obi-Wan Kenobi briefly before you go into battle, but it can be bad if you're living in that spirit world of imagined glory by proxy.
Yeah, vicarious living is what it makes
Yes.
me think of. I mean, we live in that age of the
Yes.
screen, and back even in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, when Roald Dahl wrote it, there was Mike Teavee, and his moral failing as a child was being too caught up in television shows, and
Oh,
so
right.
they adapted that in the newer Willy Wonka with not the newest. The newest one's a musical, Timothy Chalamet, but the one from 2005 with Johnny Depp, they made Mike like, I think he was a video game uh, player. He was addicted to video gaming, I believe. And so you see the through line. And so I think people can idealize so quickly now, and the spell become broken so quickly. Like you go on a date and it's not your projected ideal because there's been that ability to see the person on screen, hope that it's all the stuff you want, and then you come with the expectations primed versus you meet the person at church or in a neighborhood or whatever, and you didn't know what to expect and you were pleasantly surprised. And so I wish I had more solutions for that. I think doing stuff in person is great. It's a wonderful way to go. And online, it is possible to do well. It completely is. It's just both people have to go into it saying, all right, coming into it with goodwill, with expectations for respect, but as everything else, we're going to see what happens. And I'm going to admire what they have that's positive. I'm going to examine if what they have is negative is what I can deal with. So I love what you're saying. I think identification is what I would call identifying with Obi-Wan when you're Luke Skywalker, saying, okay, I learned the light side of the Force, the tactics, the lightsaber dueling tactic, but also the philosophy. I'm going to draw on it now. It's part of me. Versus,
Yeah.
well, Obi-Wan, I found out he lied to me. So if Luke had idealized when he found out Obi-Wan lied about Darth Vader being his father, he might have said, well, I looked up to this guy and he was everything and he lied to me. I'll never listen to him again. But instead, he could view Ben Kenobi, then Obi-Wan, when he revealed his full name, as, okay, well, so I don't like that he lied, but this guy's been looking out for me and I'm going to take the positive there and I'm going to integrate that and I'm going to become a great Jedi because
Yeah.
that's the goal. And so I'm going to overlook the human failings. I'm going to overlook that and see that someone has my interests in mind and did what they thought was best that I don't agree with. So I think that's actually a really cool little idea. I love that you brought up Star Wars into it. As you know, I can talk. I can talk.
Can talk Star Wars. Well,
Yeah.
isn't it true then that even in the case where using Obi-Wan Kenobi as an example, he lied about Darth Vader being your dad. If you idealize correctly and thoroughly and deeply in an enriching way that's going to benefit you with inspiration all your life, where you can remember it in the right times that you need to, wouldn't you give him a benefit of the doubt, even if he blatantly lied? He must have been doing it to help you, like you said, to
Yes.
protect you, even
Yes.
though he
I think
lied.
so. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, look at the opposite. Look at how Anakin idealized the Jedi in somewhat of a self-serving way, and he loved the accolades. He loved being the chosen one. And I mean, Anakin, he was a tragic character. He wasn't a villain from the jump. So I'm not trying to paint it that way. But when Palpatine came along and said, "Oh, I can help you save your wife, by the way, who I know you're having premonitions of." If Anakin had been better bonded with the Jedi, he would have been able to suss that out and say, "No way." So, but he
right,
did. He turned on
right.
the Jedi. He thought the Jedi were liars and political power grabbers. So he idealized the Emperor, and he idealized the Jedi because he had some very bad miscommunications, and Mace Windu was portrayed as a bit cold in Episode 3, and I think that was to help show how Anakin could betray people he was so entrenched with. okay, whatever. But even Yoda, Anakin was kinda detached from Yoda. Yoda trained Luke in a much more intimate way later, Anakin's own son, than Yoda did from what we see, I think, in the prequels, and so I wonder if Yoda had a moment where he decided to go more hands-on again because he wasn't the grand leader of this panel, and he was in the swamps of Dagobah with Luke in there in the trenches, literally. So that's an example of someone saying, "Okay, well, I have to lead through doing and not just saying." And I don't know if the creator, if Lucas had that in mind, if he wanted to show that Yoda had grown by showing that he was more aloof in the prequels. But if so, that's genius. Very good attachment psychology.
Hmm. I'm guessing it wasn't genius.
I like
Due to
Luke.
his
I think he had good ideas, man.
well, due to his ability to write dialogue later on, I'm not a fan of that. But
The
he
dialogue?
was feeling his yeah, he was feeling his way through a story that already has set itself up to be authentic and real. Just the way he set the story up and characterized the characters,
Joseph
um,
Campbell, man.
and as the author Will Storr would
Yes.
say that if you start with characterization, that makes the plot and the story. It's the same concept as Freud quoting the Stoic philosopher Epictetus, who said, "Character is destiny." In other words, whatever your character is, if you're a bank robber type, or you're a massive narcissist, or you're a you know a Luke Skywalker, or you're a Darth Vader, or you're an evil stepmother, whatever you are, that naturally leads to whatever unique story of your life develops. It'll have a certain pattern to it that's going to be kind of universal to all those like you in character. And this is what the ego defenses are about, and why we propose there being a superpower, either antidote or analog to the less mature and more primitive ego defenses. So I was thinking about idealization and Jeremy's rich article about it, and I was thinking about how well it's not a completely primitive psychotic level ego
Nope.
defense. It's not the worst, but it is considered immature by George Vaillant and by the positive psychologists and by the psychoanalysts. What would be an analogous mature version of idealization? Well, I think it would be going from young Luke Skywalker to mature Luke Skywalker to leader Luke Skywalker, General Skywalker. I think it would be going from being a fanboy to dipping your toes in the waters of this superhero you've been following and starting to do things, try practice things. I like Star Wars as the analogy because it's like practicing at the Force over and over and over again, like martial arts, practicing at your sword, your lightsaber, your flips, your jumps, your mental acuity to focus the Force and all this stuff. Just like in any religion, just like in any faith, just like in any complex, sophisticated career endeavor or profession, or just like in a medieval guild,
Yeah.
becoming a blacksmith or becoming an equestrian, um, custodian of horses, or being a shepherd, whatever it is you learned, that's a craft, a skill, needed repetition. It needed a little bit of failure. It needed mentorship during or after the failures to correct your way skills. It had to have this person other than you supervising your growth, which is basically initiation as an imprinting phenomenon for us. I think it's the fourth printing imprinting phenomenon. Initiation. We need
Yes.
idealization in order to, especially in today's world where we initiate alone. We don't initiate ourselves. We can't do that. But somebody's got to, or we won't grow as men and women, as boys and girls. Today they call boys and girls friends, by the way, in school. It sounds like the word comrade to the Russians. Um, but boys and girls can't become men and women without initiation. And initiation you cannot do for yourself. Luke Skywalker had to have Yoda, or what's key is the memory of Yoda, the memory of Obi-Wan Kenobi. For the
Yeah.
rest of us, the memory of our good teachers and those elders who were kind to us at some point in our lives, we remember what they did for us and we have gratitude for it. And that is the only way to initiate without, and then to do so alone, but to not be the one initiating yourself. If you're the one initiating yourself into a higher level skill, deeper meaning in life, higher level career performance, a greater love in your love life, transitioning between being single to married, married to a parent, there must be someone other than you who's more skilled at these things than you, or you're just a narcissist who but he believes in their own divinity so much that they think, they can initiate themselves. They just have the whole world and universe figured out. So that's a positive adult-like use of idealization. And I thought that the mature version of that might be words similar or synonymous to the word fortitude or having strength, being able to stand alone in the wilderness, in the unknown, and see what you're made of. So I think of fortitude, but I also thought of assertiveness for its action oriented nature. In other words, a big thing that happens going from idealization to being a mature adult is transitioning from fantasy or mere support or praise into action. You got to go out into the world. You got to go start your business. You got to start your practice. You got to change cities. You've got to break up or get together or marry or divorce or whatever it is you're going to do. You need to start acting, taking action. So I think of the words action, fortitude, assertiveness, and synonyms to those as the antidote for the dark side of idealization.
Man, I love
Thoughts?
that.
That,
It,
that was a long-winded thing, but hey,
no, I love
that's what I
that.
do.
No, you're great. I think so. If we look at idealization, okay, how does it go bad? We talked about that. In my article, I'll talk about people, the press turning on Princess Diana, digging up dirt on her when she didn't fit the royal mold. Che Guevara being the revolutionary who became enshrined. I liked your Han Solo and Carbonite metaphor. I think, yeah, if the flip side of that coin, the positive version is identification and becoming General Skywalker, becoming the hero after being mentored by one, then yes, that initiation, that action follows as the antidote to that. You could say, well, now I'm working out what it's like to have these attributes, and I'm becoming. I'm seeing that. I'm a human being, and maybe my mentor's mistake now makes sense. I think of how Luke, was upset at being lied to by Yoda, and then you see in the sequel trilogy, he panics when he sees that Kylo Ren, aka Ben Solo, is going to the dark side, and he reacts strongly, overreacts to that. It's like, yeah, heavy's the head that wears the crown, man. The hero walks a human path, right? So when you take action and when you start integrating the lessons of your mentors, you can see that, wow, it was hard work being as upstanding as they were, or sticking to the work ethic they did, and so that there's a living out of it that I think it really takes you out of the fantasy. I mean, it's so interesting how we have such fantasy ridden lives. And, you brought up video games, and there's video game tournaments now where someone can take this, digital goal system of taking good shots in a shooter game or whatever, and then they can make a real goal out of it. And well, it's very few who actually make it to that level. It's like, well, gamifying something and then taking that gamification into real life. It's like people have so many different ways to put their time now, and almost anything can become a strength and a way to show confidence and um, some degree of initiation. And having a mentor, I think mentorship is massively underrated. I think a lot of colleges at COVID and after have moved toward digital classes where you talk to your professor, but then you do all this work on your own. Well, when I went to college and grad school, I loved getting to know the professor's passions, bonding with them, sticking around after class and learning, representing the
Yeah.
ecology club. And for the
The
school,
physicality, the physicality of them being there. And I think there are probably equally potent experiences of mentoring for both males and females, but in their own unique ways. The thing you made me think of there for a second was my mind just went to rough and tumble play. Why? Well, for male development, for the development of a son and a daughter, rough and tumble play from the father is absolutely necessary. It's the most important thing for them to learn boundaries, limits, and action, to go out into the world and take actions in which you're unsure of yourself, in which it's the unknown. And I know this sounds woo woo, deeply metaphorical or spiritual or something, but Warren Farrell, John Gray, Jordan Peterson, all of these researchers have looked at rough and tumble play as being crucial for the development of both boys and girls to be able to go out into the world. And
sure.
so when you just told me, gee, Zoom, yeah, Zoom's kind of sort of okay for mentorship, or it isn't really mentorship, it's just lecturer followed by me doing solitary work, homework. But what is it like to physically be in the same room as a really just admirable professor, mentor of yours, male or female, and to witness their facial gestures and their stature and their description of their lives in
Yes.
person? Nothing compares. I think that's like rough and tumble play. I think
Brilliant.
it's like argue with them a little bit. That's the rough and tumble. You arguing with them. If you don't get to argue with your professor live in person with the social penalty of offending, avoiding offending, then you haven't had the equivalent of rough and tumble play for you to be capable of going out into the world and taking action in the world, which is the adult way, instead of the fantasy land of permanent idealization, being a fanboy or fangirl.
I mean, permanent indifference for if you have a professor who gives an assignment, you write it, they give you some comments, and it's done. Like, so I don't think you can talk idealization without talking about mentorship. I love that we're discussing it. And I mean, if you want to be a great video game player and you want to be famous, see who did it first. I mean, I'm using that example because anything, even digital play, digital goals, can be made into something that you develop mastery and grit and determination. And so if you're in finance, if you want to be a great therapist, it's about the clients, it's about bonding and showing empathy. It's also about expertise. And so seek out people who've gone before you. Our show here is a great example. Um, I'm in a different era in a different profession, and you've been doing psychiatry a while, but you're very masterful at therapy, which is an exception now. I think among psychiatrists, it's not, a lot of it's med dispensing, which is necessary, but so I think that's an ingredient people don't know to ask for. If all you've known is digital school where you turn assignment, you get graded, and you don't connect to that, you don't know different
Yeah,
models. You don't know apprenticeship as a model or the schools
yeah,
where you sit around and talk for an hour with your professor and have a sort of public forum debate, the academy, right? Going back to Greek days of debate and rhetoric. You don't know that if you're not taught. And I think a generation now just hasn't really been taught that or connected. I mean, there was an entire generation affected by COVID in their schooling and they couldn't graduate. So, I know why it happened, but I think, especially for men, to paint broadly and generalize, a lot of them have trouble in school. Well, part of that's potentially having to sit still and learning styles. And when you talk about rough and tumble play, I think kinesthetic feedback, learning how strong you are, learning how to move your body. I mean, the big wave now in mental health is mindfulness. And I would say, so mindfulness has been a wave since the early 90s. I really think now it's a lot of body psychotherapies like EMDR, like sensory motor psychotherapy, like somatic experiencing therapy, where you move through and experience the flashbacks and navigate through them. And so, well, why do we have to do that? This goes to the point of, well, you don't need therapy. You need a friend. You need a father. You need blank. Well, what if they don't have that though? So that's the thing. Like,
Yeah.
that would be like saying, you don't need a vitamin D supplement, you need the sun. Well, what if somebody works in an office all day? You're going to tell them to quit and just work in construction? Like, what are we talking about? Everyone can't do that. So, my argument against you don't need therapy is, well, you might not have had the imprinting originally, and you need a jump start to then know it and then seek it outside the therapy office.
Yes. Yes. I think that's mic drop.
I
Um,
I appreciate it.
I at least it was the facial expression of mic drop that you portray there.
Yeah, I was tossing it back to you. I mean, I know it's a lot, but
Yeah.
kinesthetic
It
learning
no.
just
Well, kinesthetic learning. I keep going to John Barry and Martin Seeger and thinking about they kind of imply. I shouldn't say this exactly this way. They imply they imply males don't need therapy, but they don't really mean that. Males need action taking as therapy. It is their therapy. So if there's a therapy that is behavioral activation therapy, BAT, that will do. If it's accept and commit therapy where you set goals and you try to achieve goals, that will do. Men's groups, definitely, because you assign each other challenges to go try for a week and come back and talk to me next week as your mutual mentor. And they mentor each other. That's the most powerful therapy for males. Females need belonging generally in the middle of the bell curve of
yeah.
females. So their kind of mentoring is it's a maternal yet grandmotherly, wise, welcoming, and it is conversational.
Yeah.
It is
I
language based. It's touching, it's hugging, but it's sharing of emotion and it's belonging.
Yeah,
It's
I get that.
belonging to the sharing.
Yeah, no, and I get that, and I'm not gonna disagree. I said, yeah, initially, I think both people can need that. Like, if guys only had they had no nurturing, they might need that more feminine aspect. I
Well,
think
we all
women
need
have
both, right? We
I've
all
had
need
so
both,
many yes, I've had so
mothering
many
and fathering.
yeah, I've had so many female clients who have come to me and they've said, I've gone to therapists before and all they do is say, wow, that was rough. Or they just listened. I don't know what I got out of it. And I want something with more action and I want to know
Ah,
what's going on. And I want somebody who's going to tell me
right.
what's up and no nonsense. And
Push
I've had a
me.
lot of women. It's very, and you know what? I'm not the tough love therapist. How I talk on here is different than how I talk in office. I do bring up if people said they want to follow one goal and they're not pursuing it, I'll say, "Hey, do we want to check back in on this? Are you not feeling it now?
Yes.
What's going on?" So
Yes.
that's, confronting in so many words, but I think the market for action focused therapy is very high because there's a lack of teaching it hands on in many grad schools because they have to teach so much. It's like a buffet of samples and so and therapists are sometimes afraid of offending clients, which I get, but and they don't have
Yes.
models like
Yes.
EMDR. They don't think they need to do that, I guess. But there's a huge
Mm.
market for action focused therapy for men and women. And I think some women are tired of not knowing what they're getting out of therapy and not moving towards something, especially if they're career people or think in that way or were raised to think that way.
Yeah. You made me, think for just a moment, gee, what could the cause be of this rush of females into your practice wanting more action therapies? And the first thing that popped to mind was, ooh, do they have weakened fathers, weakened by the culture? They're looking for fathering of some sort, no matter who it's from. It could be from a female, it could be from a male,
Yeah,
but are they looking
absolutely.
for fathering?
It's a good question. I mean, there's so many people who had absentee fathers and don't know what it's like to have a positive masculine presence, which is unfortunate.
Hmm.
So I think that's kind of a
Yeah.
valid I think that's a very valid point to bring up that, yeah, if someone doesn't know positive masculinity or positive action focus because they didn't see that, then they're gonna need to barometer of, okay, this is workaholism. On the other side is laziness. Where's the middle? Where do I go with that? And how do I get my needs met through doing something? If I don't want somebody to just tell me, "Oh, that was rough." I think that's a great point. I mean, that there's not always a masculine presence there. There isn't very often, and it's there's a lot of different reasons for that, but I'll probably
Mm.
stay out of that. But yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a call for it for sure.
So what about the then, kind of heading toward some conclusions and skills? What about the nature of character virtues, which are higher level ego defenses, mature ego defenses? They tend to have a lot of clustering into synonymous groups. Like I think of fortitude, strength, resilience, persistence, and assertiveness as all being similar to each other in ways, or at least components of action. Components of action. So I'm thinking if there were an antidote for the dark side of identification, it would be you personally marching into the unknown, going into unfamiliar territory.
Yes.
That's what we need heroes for. That's what we need to idealize in our youth and practice that with using the force, if you will,
Yep.
and then eventually um, take a stab at shooting for our dreams and failing numerous times, but correcting and learning new skills along the way.
Yes. Yes, I agree. And I think back to I think sublimation, because sublimation is the defense that says channel your anxious energy drive, channel that
Yes.
into I see socially valued activities, or I would add personally valued activities, right? Things that are or societally, whatever you want to say, professionally
Yeah.
valued. So you're essentially taking the urge to have an easy answer or someone that will make no mistakes, that is here and live right now in the flesh, and saying, I'm going to go take action at my profession or hobby. And that's sublimation in action, man.
Hmm. I think of a couple things. I wonder, in wrapping up this topic, if I could combine the advice of an old professor of mine in psychoanalysis with, I thought of Russell Crowe in Gladiator. I thought of how he looked at the audience in the Colosseum and said, "Are you not entertained?
Yeah.
Basically, you foolish little children. I'm the one doing the actions here. It is real life and death for me, and you are just merely entertained. Are you not entertained?" So I think that's the castigation of the criticism of those who stay stuck in the Peter Pan pure idealization mindset versus going into the arena, which reminds me of the Theodore Roosevelt quote, the arena speech about courage, right? You
Wow.
will never be one of those cold, timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat if you never go into the arena of life. And then the other thing, just my last statement is, um, Dr. Mike Moran was uh, a professor of mine in psychoanalysis school, and I once asked him, "What is ambivalence
Mm.
really, and what is the cure for it?" And he said, "I don't know what ambivalence is, but the cure is choose anything, choose anything, choose either way, choose left, choose right. Either way, choose something. And I think, and I was confused at the time he said it. I was like, What? But what if you choose the wrong thing? I mean, and it's disastrous. But what he's trying to say is the only way to learn is experientially, in order to grow as a person and become a more mature, high character person who's more potent at life and finds more meaning and more love and more success. It's by just choose anything, so long as it isn't obviously immediately deadly. Choose anything and then learn everything you can from the undoubted mistake that occurs as soon as you choose anything randomly. And then you get better and keener discernment in the future, and you would call that wisdom.
Yes. Alan Watts said that someone who spends his time thinking knows only thought, and I think that's a really good quote.
Mm, wow,
You don't
nice,
you don't have any skill. You have to risk embarrassment and risk failure.
well said.
Thank you.
All right,
Great
so
show
the
in the
answer,
box.
yeah, exactly. So the answer to idealization is, well, there are a lot of positive uses of it if you use it briefly and precisely, like seeing Obi-Wan Kenobi in your mind if you're Luke Skywalker or Princess Leia, but or it's your fairy godmother if you're Cinderella. You
Yep.
know, it's your Yoda if you're certain people. It's your grandmother, your grandfather, it's your heroes. So positive use of heroes is they help us initiate, not initiate ourselves. They initiate us. If
Yeah.
we are stuck alone, as we often are in this lonely modern culture, hopefully it won't be that way forever. And what we need to do is to learn fortitude, strength, the importance of action, and understanding the nature of ambivalence as a paralytic agent in our lives, and that the cure for ambivalence is do anything. So long as it's not deadly, do anything and learn from that and just go from there. Follow your nose, one step after the other. Thank you all. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, I like to say, boys and girls, thank you
Yes.
for being
Thanks to
here.
everyone here. Good comments. Great
All
time.
right.
See ya.